How's it going, everybody? I'm 1000. I'm an artist from Southwest Michigan. Today, I'm gonna do a little tips and tricks video on getting clean, straight, beautiful lines with acrylic paint. I'm gonna talk to you about the brushes I use, about the paint I use, the consistency, and a few other tips and tricks. When I first started making paintings, I was actually very scared and nervous to make my final lines with acrylic paint. I didn't have the confidence in my brush work to be able to do the lines, so I would actually take India ink markers after I had done all the fill colors and draw the lines on with ink markers. That is one way to do it, but it kind of had this mismatch vibe to the art. Like, it's kind of a cool aesthetic, but I got tired of it and I was like, I really need to learn how to make these lines. I was just so afraid to ruin my piece because of my inadequate techniques with painting lines. So that's why I wanted to make this video, because I feel like beginner artists or even maybe some intermediate artists are feeling less than confident in their acrylic line art. And once that you start practicing that and are able to achieve that, it's gonna open up a whole different world of how you can make art with acrylic paints. First things first, the brushes. There's a few different kinds of brushes that I use to get nice lines with acrylic paint. On larger pieces, even murals, I'll use a flat brush, because if you look at the tip of that brush when you hold it sideways, it's pretty much a line. I've also got these nice and fancy Trekell liner brushes, but honestly my favorite is this pack right here by Jerry Q. This is the 12-piece, high-quality, golden synthetic detail brushes by Jerry Q. There's some liner brushes in there, there's some detail brushes, there's some tiny flat brushes. This is a 12-pack that goes for $8.99 on US Amazon. I don't know how much it is in other countries, so that's less than $1 per brush. And even though I have these fancy and expensive other liner brushes, some artists might yell at me for this, but I cannot tell a difference at all. And these things, they're just my favorite liner brushes, and they're so freaking cheap. And then as far as the paint that I'm gonna be using, it's the golden fluid acrylic. Fluid acrylics, as the name states, are a bit more fluid. They're more juicy and loosey and goosey, and they're not like heavy body acrylic paints. So those are the tools I'm using for this video. Let's jump over to the art station and start making some lines as I talk you through some of my tips and tricks on how to make them clean and good. Let's go. Okie dokie, so I have a pre-gessoed wooden panel here from Blick. I went ahead and toned it because that's just kind of how I always paint. But let's get some paint on our palette and start painting some lines. This is a stay wet palette. So I very rarely make black lines, so I'm gonna go ahead and use a little bit of turquoise phthalo. That's that fluid consistency I like. And we will use a bit of carbon black just to make it even darker. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and mix in a little bit of this black to get it that darker color that I'm looking for. Midnight teal. Now I have this Jerry Q pack here. We've got all different sizes of detail brushes here. But these ones with the very long bristles are the liner brushes. I'll just grab the number 6 because that seems to be the biggest one in this pack. And you can see that has quite a big bristle on it, a long bristle, and that extra length will add some nice curvature to our brush, which hopefully will let us paint some cleaner lines. Now when it comes to getting my paint the correct consistency, my water thing is sitting on my palette because I'm trying to get this all in the same shot. I am just gonna dip this brush in the water, fully laden the brush with water, and just kind of mix that in to my fluid paint to get it even more watery. Maybe one more. Mix in a bit more paint. And that changes it from a fluid consistency almost to like a nearly ink consistency. Now getting this just right is gonna take some practice, because if you just put like a whole bunch of water, that's gonna be not good. That's gonna be way too watery and it'll almost be like watercolor. The edges of it are gonna start blooming out because that water is just gonna wanna seep into your panel or canvas or whatever. So you wanna get it a bit less thick than what it comes out of the tube as. Water it down a bit to where it's like a thick ink instead of, you know, fluid paint. That way you're gonna be able to get your lines nice and clean and not have them be like really chunky with paint. This is gonna come with practice. You'll be able to visually look at it and be like, yeah, that's looking about right. It's not too watery, it's not too thick. Now when you go to paint your lines, I don't know if I can get it on camera, but do you see that little drip right there? Sometimes it likes to live on this metal band that holds the brush to the piece of wood. You gotta make sure that's off, because when you tilt this down, it's gonna run to the tip and make a drip right there that is gonna ruin your lines. I have had that happen to me so many times. So make sure that once you have your paint on your brush, that you really have this piece of your brush like dried off, so some bead of water doesn't run down there, soak into the paint, and then turn it into this kind of like watery color consistency thing. See, look at that. You see that drip forming right there? Yeah, that's gonna be bad news. That's gonna be bad news when you go to paint your line. Look at it, it wants to drip. It wants to drip. Okay, the paint is prepped. Let's make some lines. Okay, so I'm gonna take this brush that's laden with paint, clean it off, wipe it down to get all that excess water off of there, and get some dark teal paint in here. And we have this long curvature of this brush, so I'm just gonna follow my line art, starting with soft pressure. And as I apply more pressure, my stroke gets wider, and then as I release pressure, it tapers off, and I've got a clean line around the outside of this character. I'm gonna start soft here on this cheekbone, and then slowly press harder to make my line wider. And because I have a very illustrative style, I'm gonna start with the first line art just as my guide. I got dark lines going around here, which will kind of act as a guide and also play a role in the first pass of shadows. Then I'm gonna paint the skin and the face and then do my final lines. Look at how long I can make this line go because of the curvature of that brush. Holds a lot of paint. Now it's finally running out, but a long, smooth line. Now over here on this side, I have this panel here. Because I'm right-handed, I need something to support my wrist as I'm painting these lines. So if you have a thick book or a panel or something you can lay down on this side, that way your hand won't just be floating in space with nothing to sit on. On this other cheekbone, I'm just gonna start soft and then slowly add more pressure to widen my line out and just follow my pencil sketch. I'm also gonna go over the line that I've already created, practicing being able to recreate your lines. Look at how curved that liner brush is right there. Really helping me get a smooth, straight line. Pick up back here over on the chin. Pressing down, really bending that brush to just get as smooth of a line as possible. And then I'll usually go back over my lines to make sure I haven't left a thick glob of paint like on this cheekbone right here. Basically, when you very first put your brush down, it's gonna deposit kind of a drop of paint. So I'll go back over it to smooth that out. Now I'm gonna grab my blow dryer and dry this off so that I can paint in the middle without dragging my hand over my wet lines. Now let's work on this left eye. I'm really just focusing on not going too fast, getting that stroke and pressure exactly how I want it. This is where practice comes in. Feeling confident with that liner brush, the bend of it, the consistency of the paint. Now, when I get to here, I have a tight curve. So I have to release that bend on my brush because I'm not gonna be able to go around this C shape right here. I just have to come in very gently with a light touch and just follow that curve very delicately and maybe make a couple passes to widen up the width of that line. One of the weaknesses of these long liner brushes is that making tight curves can be a bit more tricky because you don't have room to lay that brush down and utilize that long bend. But you can either switch to just a straight up detail brush with short bristles, or you can very gently come in here with a very light touch and just make a few passes to get the line width that you want. But for lines like this, laying down those bristles and using the bend of the brush makes it so that you can get a pretty smooth line there. I'm not the king of smooth lines. When you look at those lettering guys, the graffiti guys, calligraphy guys who are obsessed, I'm just in awe of those guys. But I'll tell you what, these liner brushes took me from absolute garbage to mildly decent, passable, still working to get better all the time. This is something you should spend some time getting used to. Get a feel for those bristles bending. Get a feel for how to control that taper, the eyebrow. I'm just gonna smash this down as hard as it'll go to make it as thick as possible. I also just find these brushes really fun to work with because it just has this kind of smooth flow to it, especially when you can really rock that line taper and use that pressure to make kind of a cool calligraphy-esque line. I'm constantly adding more paint to my brush and then dabbing it a couple times to remove the excess. That's why my paint table is just covered in paint. For the nose here, we got a lot of smaller angles. Let's switch to shorter hair detail brush. And I can almost do a little bit of like paint sketching to shape up the nose here because those long bristles are not the best for doing these smaller strokes. And because this is my first pass of my line art, I can do kind of a sketchy kind of pass on the paint here. because I'm gonna come in and actually fill in this skin color. But I like to lay down a dark layer of lines first as my guide, provide some shadows for what I'm gonna do. And of course I'll clean them up in the end. Because I have that more illustrative graphic style that does feature line art, not quite as soft and painterly as some other artists. I like a little bit of crisp lines. I see some artists in the comments and stuff always looking for the most opaque paint, but sometimes the fact that this isn't like perfectly 100% opaque like a one shot or something like that allows you to do a bit of like shading and shadows on your first pass with the transparency of this paint. Fill this area in because those long liner brushes are not so good for filling in areas. So since I have this smaller brush out, I'll go ahead and fill these in. Let's switch back to our line brush for the lips. Make sure there's no big drips on the brush that are gonna mess me up. Thicker pressure in the middle of the lips, and then I'll taper it out with light pressure to the outer edge. Very satisfying once that you feel confident with that kind of motion. Make it nice and thick right underneath. Little details of the lips. Anyway, I'm gonna fill in this skin color now. Okay, while I paint this face, I'm gonna take a quick moment to let you know this video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is a website where you can build a website, and with Squarespace, it's super easy. All you gotta do is take your amazing content, drop it into their beautiful templates, and boom, you have a website. I've been using Squarespace for years and years for my own website. I love their image galleries, their e-commerce, their member exclusive areas, and the list of features goes on and on. No longer do you need to know HTML or know how to code. It's just so easy with Squarespace. But if you ever do run into any issues, they have 24/7 customer support. So if you're an artist or a designer, photographer, or anyone who has a passion they want to share with the world, you deserve to have a beautiful website. Listen, go to squarespace.com to start your free trial. Then when you're ready to launch your site, go to squarespace.com/1000 for 10% off the first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace. Okay, so I have my face painted in here, and we're gonna do our final lines. So I've got my dark colored paint here. Grab my liner brush, and let's just very carefully do this process over again. I'm gonna press down. This is also gonna make my lines more opaque. Another thing that I forgot to mention in my first section is you have to be very careful about how you release your brush, because if you're doing it all fast, it can shoot out in the wrong direction. So you need to focus on your release and make sure you're releasing on the exact same path as you want your line to be, so that as you lift your brush, it doesn't make some crazy stroke that's not intended. And practicing being able to go back over your lines with somewhat of an accurate stroke is something that's gonna be beneficial to cleaning up your lines on the final pass, because as I was painting, I was cutting into my lines a lot. I mean, look at this eyebrow. It's just basically completely covered. Paint is going into my previous line art, so I'm gonna come back and refresh it to make them all clean. Let's get this eyebrow back in here. A bit of a wobbly line on the eyebrow is cool to me because it just makes it look like a hint of the hair of an eyebrow. That's actually where I want my lines to be wobbly. Eyelashes. I'm gonna kind of start in the middle, because if I put my brush down on the very point of that eyelash, it might not come to that tapered point that I want. So I'm gonna start more down here and then come back this way and release to that point that I'm looking for. Now, some of these lines I don't think I will refresh. Like the under eye wrinkles, we'll leave them softer. They don't need to be that harsh line necessarily. We'll come back in and kind of crisp up these eyelashes. I'm just going really kind of slow and methodical, because doing a weird stroke at this point is a little bit more tricky to fix because I have all these different layers of like shading and everything. But if I do mess it up, we can just kind of figure it out. It's just paint. You can always paint over it. Laying that brush down nice and flat, super curved on this outer line, trying my best to stick to that original shape that I painted. This is the part that years ago I had very little confidence in myself and being able to achieve, but with practice and time spent, I feel a bit more confident doing this final line pass with acrylic paint. This little bit of the nose is probably going to be the last stroke I do with the liner brush, and then I'm going to switch to the short hair detail brush. I'm just bringing back the original illustrative shapes of my drawing. Okay, let's switch back to the detail brush for the final bits of this nose. This is a Trekell number 2 detail brush. Just gonna get the shape of my nostril back. Bring in this shape right here. Final lines, looking halfway decent. Cool, I'm happy with that. There's my line art. Okay, so this is my piece, line art, not too shabby. Thank you guys for watching. Maybe you learned a thing or two in this little mini tutorial. Huge shout out to my patrons whose names are going by on the side of the screen right now. If you're an artist watching this and you have any tips on how you make clean lines, leave them down in the comments. I swear I learn more from my own comment section than I do anywhere else on the internet. You guys out there always have so many awesome tips. That's one of the reasons why I like putting out little tutorials. Also, maybe I'll send this painting to someone down in the comments as a start of a collab or something. Leave a comment, I don't know, something funny, something weird. Maybe you could say what you would do on this collab, what you would add. Would you add some hair? Would you add a bunch of monsters around this? Would you add some leaves and flowers? And maybe throw your Instagram in there, except when you put your Instagram, don't do a link and don't do like IG with an @ symbol, because I don't want YouTube to automatically remove it because of spam. Maybe put IN:, don't do the @ symbol, and then your Instagram name. Maybe our favorite within the first 2 weeks of this video coming out, we'll find you, we'll check out your art, we'll send you this, and we can do a blind collab. This could be the start of something, because I don't know what else to do with this. Why not? Random community collaboration. All right, y'all, if you got anything out of this, or if you want to see more tutorials from me in the future, leave a like on this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're not already. I'm 1000. Thank you to my patrons. You guys are the coolest people on the internet. Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Line art. All right. Catch you on the next one. Peace out.